Why ACE? Okay, why are you looking at this particular area? Why is it important to you? Well, you've tried most things. Okay, you've tried a lot of things. You've tried positive thinking. Okay, you've tried all that. You've done that, and you try really hard to think positively, and maybe you've really succeeded at that for certainly a period of time. You've tried affirmations. You may have tried that, and perhaps you get your feedback in your inner world, which is if you say something like, well, I'm beautiful, and your feedback is, no, you're not. Why are you saying that? You kind of think, well, I'm not sure I like what comes back to me in terms of that my inner world and communication. So you've tried that. It doesn't seem to necessarily work for you, but it works fine for everybody else. And you've tried, the key thing, you've tried being happy and finding your joy. Absolutely, you've done that. You've made a hell of an effort as far as that's concerned. Well, what happens when your mind goes blank? When you don't know what joy looks like? You don't know what it looks like. You don't know what it is. Because your foundational experience hasn't offered that as a marker. You don't know, so you have to start creating it. But where do you create it from? How do you discover that when you're a sensitive, kind of stressing out? That your system goes into overwhelm. How do you do that? Well, the ACE study or ACE study was developed in the late 1990s. It was actually done by accident following a national obesity program in the US. What they were finding a bit of a challenge was that people who were having a level of transformation in terms of they were losing weight seemed to be dropping out of the program like flies, and they couldn't figure out why. Why would people be dropping out when they're losing weight? Well, the ACE study was commissioned to look at this, as in, did adverse childhood experiences have an impact on that as to why people were pulling out? Well, billions was pumped into this study to look at childhood adversity and its impact on adult emotional and physical health. It became a 10-point questionnaire. That was how it was developed. And you most likely know what your score is, having completed the ACE test as part of this session. You would have done it as the first part of the Family Secret quiz. Okay, so the results of the study were fascinating, and certainly the results of how we've looked at it was also fascinating in terms of, no, I'm not going to say fascinating, it's the wrong word, revealing. Okay, it was revealing. So this shows you on your screen right now is the order. So the order for intuitive sensitives. Okay, so this was the order, as in, the strongest order of how this came over. So what did we do? Well, we had over a 7-day period, over 1,000, I think it actually was over that 7-day period, it was more like 1,700 self-identified intuitive sensitive people complete our questionnaire, which included the 10 childhood adversity questions and 10 I added specifically for intuitive sensitive people as adults and in terms of your experience as a sensitive in your adult life. So the ACE scores came out as before the age of 18. Okay, so those related to your life before the age of 18, and this is the order in which people had life experiences. So what did we have? Well, we had quite clearly these 3 areas here. Verbal and emotional abuse was number 1, emotional neglect number 2, and mental illness was number 3. In my mind, and how I certainly see these in terms of intuitive sensitive people, when you put these 3 things together, mental illness, and this isn't to say, that the people who completed this questionnaire had mental illness. This is to do with their early life experience. So prior to the age of 18, a parent who experienced it was quite clear that a parent had these as something happening in their life. So if you put these 3 areas together, you can see quite clearly that it's most likely that this is something, certainly for intuitive sensitives, that isn't unique to your specific life at the moment in your generation, so to speak. This is something that has occurred through the generations. So when you put these three things together, to me, that suggests, when, the highest areas are verbal and emotional abuse, emotional neglect, and mental illness. Put those three things together, it gives quite a strong picture, in the sense that also, your parents and previous generations also have a significant adverse childhood experience score, but they don't, they haven't actually dealt with it, and certainly hadn't dealt with it by the time that you came into this world. Hence the reason that you would have been on, that receiving end of those situations. So this doesn't excuse it whatsoever. It certainly doesn't excuse it in the slightest. But it starts to give a feeling of a reason, or also that, you can connect and see that you're not the only one that had these kind of things or these sorts of experiences. Now, as we move on to the next diagram, you can see here is the ACE score calculation. Okay, so as intuitive sensitives, this is what you experience, or the percentage of each area came up. So as you can see, we had a significant amount of people who were lucky enough to have an ACE score of 0, which is fantastic. It means that, yes, there are some sensitives with an ACE score of 0, but there will still be factors in their life which add to their level of sensitivity, which will become apparent later in this session. But the most, almost neck and neck, which is people with a score of 3 and 4 in terms of intuitive sensitives. And I'm deeply saddened to see that we do have quite a significant amount of people with an ACE score of 10. I was hoping that maybe we had some zeros on that, but those, the 8, 9s and 10s, incredible people to be, working through this, to have a level of trust that they felt brave enough to embrace this and move forward. Really deep level of respect in my mind for that intense bravery, and an honor, to feel that I'm trusted as far as that's concerned. So I really wish that it wasn't the case, but these life experiences do definitely exist, and these are evolved souls to really be handling this and looking at it in terms of their sensitivity and their intuitive sensitivity. So what we have is quite, in my mind, quite clear indications. So as an example, if you've got a score of 4 or more, you're much more likely than someone who's got a score of 0 to have inflammatory diseases, okay, or disruptions in the body. So if you've had chronic fatigue, if you've had fibromyalgia, if you've got IBS, irritable bowel, all of those kind of things, you're starting to now have a clear picture as to why those things are possibly in your life. They go very strongly with adverse childhood experiences, and certainly when you get to a score of 6 and more, when it gets into autoimmune diseases, and people who've got a score of 6 or more, especially women, fall quite strongly into possibilities of autoimmune disruptions. So that kind of family of underactive thyroid, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, lots of things. I think there's around about 27 particular autoimmune issues, which are relatively rare in the general population, but seem to be really quite strong in intuitive sensitives. And what we have here is quite an clear indication as to why, because certainly women, various different studies, very clear studies show that they will have a higher possibility of developing those with an ACE score of 6 or more. And as we go further into the session, you become a little bit clearer as to why that is the case. Now, in this session, I can't answer everything. Okay, I can't answer everything. We had over 500 questions. Okay, 500 questions as far as this session is concerned, and which came in over a couple of days. So I'll explain that a little bit further in a moment, and shortly I'll swap to a screen where you can see me. But these, it gives you an idea as to the main sort of areas. Why am I showing you this? Primarily so that you understand that you're not the only one. Okay, you're not the only one, that you can see a picture of how this is quite clearly the case for intuitive sensitive people. Okay, so this next one, which is the second set of questions. So this is outside of the ACE, so adverse childhood experiences. This was the set of questions that I added, which were much more related to your life as a sensitive in your adult life and the types of things that you've come up against or experienced in your life. Now, most people, a high percentage of you really felt really quite strongly that, your big area is that you give in to guilt and pressure. Okay, so that will have a strong impact on the adrenals, which will possibly be a reason why you perhaps experience being tired all the time, or suffering from that kind of sense of strong exhaustion. Okay, so how these things match up, it will become really quite clear later as to how this shows in your life and how you can begin to adjust and change this. And the second area was that you're really quite fiercely loyal to those who don't deserve it. Again, there will be quite a clear reason as to that, and that will become apparent later as we go into this session. And the third one is, again, an area that's really quite strong for people. When I spoke earlier about, why can't you experience joy when everybody else seems to be, what's your idea of happy and what does that look like? Well, when it feels a little bit, what is that? What is that in my life? What does it feel like? Well, that shows, when that Grim Reaper, thinking, well, just as I really feel comfortable with something, it feels like the Grim Reaper is hiding behind a door, and I have to be prepared, and my whole system has to be prepared for that to happen. So, as we go further into this session, you'll really begin to have some answers to those particular areas as to why that happens, and what you will find very helpful as an intuitive sensitive and how that can change.